Well, it's 8 o'clock. We'll get started, or 8 o'clock my time. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona versus Louisville or Louisville or Lauderdale, depending on how you call it. So one of the things I miss about going there is the 3 or 4 days worth of debating on how you pronounce the town.
You say it like you got a mouthful of marbles.
Yeah, I know.
All right, I'm going to hop out.
Okay. Thank you, Becky.
Bye.
I always find it funny that, I've been to Louisville 3 or 4 times now. I was just there in November. And even then, even like the tourist center has like the different pronunciations of it. I guess it really depends on what part of town you're in. Anyway, my name is Joe Guadagno. Here's my contact information on the screen. We only got like 3 slides and then it's all code for here. If any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me with email, Twitter. If you want to learn more about me, check out the About JJG link that's on the screen. Or I stream 3 times a week, usually Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, about different topics relating to software development. So that being said, a little bit about me. I am a director in technology at Quicken Loans. I organize an event similar to this called Desert Code Camp, which happens once a year so far, although this year it's still up in the air, in Phoenix, Arizona. I am a Microsoft Developer Services MVP. That means I do a lot of free stuff for Microsoft, and they give me a little plaque that says thank you. I just got announced that I was a Telerik Ninja, which is very similar. I do a lot of stuff about Telerik and their products. But the more important stat is I am a father of 2, husband to 1. So today we're going to talk about migrating a .NET framework application. So we're going to take an existing sample app, I think it's called Wingtip Toys, that is written in .NET 4.5.2 and migrate it over to .NET Core. I already see there's a nice little chat going on about the debate of Louisville, or as I know to say it is with a mouthful of marbles, as Becky said. But I always love the fact that it's always a topic for discussion. So that's it for the slide deck. We're going to really focus on code in this and not my Twitter. So here's this app. I will share a link at the end in the chat. And there's a GitHub repository that you can go that has instructions for downloading the app and everything. Essentially, it's a classic ASP.NET. It's funny to say classic when there was originally a classic ASP and a classic. Now it's classic ASP.NET. This is written in 4.5.2. Oh, okay. Let me switch it out. I will switch it. Just give me 1 second. Different streaming platforms do better or not. Let me know if the font sizes need to be increased or not. I can do that also. Just when you're in a audience, like a real conference venue, dark mode is typically better on the eyes. That's better. Let me know. This is going to be the font size. I can boost that up. I typically don't boost it up because the streams, but I do have a way to increase it. Is that better, Greg? Okay, cool. Just give me 1 second. I will make it bigger. Key is I have a presentation font that I use, which will take a second to load. And that bumps up the fonts and everything. Typically, I have this all loaded, but without knowing what it looks like on the screen, it's hard to tell. So give it a second, and this should be a better font size. Should be, but looks like it didn't, and just reset everything back to normal. So let's go and fix that. Options, let's go back to light, and then let's do font. No, it is set to 16. There it goes. I just needed a little quick thing, and let's go back to light. Come on. Every time I change one, it resets the other one. Let's try this for a third time now. Fonts and colors. Let's do 16 here. And that should be good. And if there's anything, yeah, I have older eyes too. Typically, I increase the font size myself. So we're going to go and walk through converting this application over from 4.5.2 to .NET Core. We're not going to cover every single piece. That could be probably an all-day thing, but I'm going to cover some of the big gotchas and kind of change some of the architecture. So just to see what the app looks like beforehand, we are going to run it. It's essentially a basic CRUD application. You have the ability to see wingtip toys. There uses Bootstrap up top. You have a home, about, contact. Click on products, goes to database, pulls out a list of products. I can click on a product, see details. You have the ability to add to a cart. You have login information in here. We're going to talk about converting some of the login, but we're not going to actually convert all the logins just because of time. And then this pulls a list of database of all the categories. So we're going to kind of update this to the latest version of Bootstrap, change this to be a control, and just kind of change the way everything works behind the scenes. So let's go to that. So I'm going to stop the app and talk about our next step. You also notice that in the middle of the screen, there is keyboard strokes. So you can see if I'm doing any keystrokes like building or anything like that without wondering what the keys are. So the first step we're going to do is we are going to add a new project. And this new project is going to be a .NET class library in .NET Standard. And the reason why it's in .NET Standard and not .NET Core, when I said we're going to migrate the app to .NET Core, is because .NET Standard allows you to talk or allows applications to communicate between different versions of the applications or different environments. So it allows .NET Core framework to talk, or sorry, .NET Framework to talk to .NET Core, allows Xamarin and all others to do it. So when you're building middle tier pieces, the lowest common denominator is typically .NET Standard. So that's where we start out, and that's where we're going to build most of our stuff. And I typically do wingtip toys because that's the product, and then what I am working on. So right now we're going to build out our domain object. This is where we're going to house all of our models for the application. So I click create, wait a week to 10 days, depending on your instance of Visual Studio, and you get the infamous class 1, which I will immediately delete. You're going to then go and create a model, and this is up to you. Some of these things are just my standards or the way I've done things over time, but to each his own. You'll see some of the things you might not agree with. Some of these are just my preferred preferences. So if we look at the models folder in Wingtip Toys, we have a couple of different models. It's mixed with a combination of things that are truly models, like card item, category, order details, and product. Then you have this identity model, which we're not going to move right now. We're going to redo that one. And then the data access models. So let's start by taking these first 5 and move them out. So I hit cut because we're cutting that, and I am going to move it into the models. If you have a tool like JetBrains ReSharper, there's also a way to do it in Visual Studio. It'll move it for you and change all the namespaces. In this case, it doesn't, so I am going to add those namespaces myself. And I can use, which I will on the next one, I can do control period in Visual Studio and change the namespace to it. which is another way. In ReSharper, you would do Alt-Enter, and it changes them. Now they're all changed and they're all moved into the model namespace. You're going to notice that there's a lot of red squiggly lines all over the place, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Most of them are because this class here, System Component Model Data Annotations, moved within .NET Core. This now changed to something called System Component Model Annotations, because they're not just around data. So we need to add a reference to that project. So I am going to right-click on the solution and choose Manage Nuget Packages for Solution. And we're going to be doing this a lot, so I'm just going to pin this to the top. Now, if you're like me, I've been working with Visual Studio for, I don't know, since it was called Visual InterDev. But once they installed Nuget, it always defaults to installed. Got to remember to click on Browse when you're adding new ones. I always tend to forget. I'm like, why can't I find it? So let's go with the first one, which is system.component model. And then we want to add the annotations. And I'm going to add them to both projects right now because it's needed for both. Click Install. Hopefully my download bandwidth is good. Click OK. Should be downloading the packages. It's going to complain because I have the web config open. I'm going to close the web config for a minute. And then we should be good to go. If we look at the output now and try to build it again, we got one succeeded and one failed, and we're getting a lot of, other issues. Mostly because, we cut out the domain models. So we have to add a reference to this new project here. So let's do add reference, choose Wingtip Toys, domain. Some of those will go away. Some of them will. Let's take a quick look at it. So we come in here, you see that the cart is highlighted. I'm going to do control period, and it's going to want to generate one. Why does it want to generate one? Because it doesn't recognize this, and it can't load the DLL. So you notice how wingtiptoys.domain does not exist. If you are watching along, you will see that in here there's a little message that says the domain targets .NET Standard 2. It cannot be referenced by a project that references .NET Standard 4.5.2. So what that means is .NET Standard itself is not supported in .NET Framework 4.5.2. So we are going to have to update that. But before we do that, let's do that now. So I'm going to go right-click here, choose Properties, or I can press Alt-Enter, change this over. Once I do that, and I'm purposely choosing 4.7.2 and not 4.8 because there's some other compatibility issues with 4.7.2, and we're only going to be, or with 4.8, and we're only going to be using this app for a little bit as we continue the migration. You get this telling you that changing the framework is going to change a bunch of other stuff. Do you want to continue? Click yes. Wait a couple minutes, then we start getting this message here that tells us that some of the packages are not downloaded. And the reason for that is because here, actually, let's look at the web config first to make sure we actually converted. So in the web config, if we converted it correctly, there'll be a new thing here that says 4.7.2. It's always in comments. But down here, which is the more important one, the compilation tells us it's in 4.7.2. So we're good there. But we want to change the HTTP runtime target to 4.7.2 also. The other thing we want to look at is our packages. So if we open up our package config, we can convert this to the new standard, but I'm not going to do that right now. You notice that they all say net 4.5.2, net 4.5.2, net 4.5.2 everywhere. So let's go and change that. So we're changing, press Control H to get change or replace. We're going to change net 4.5.2 with net 457, place all, and there are 34 cases in this case. Hit save, hit build. Most of the errors are going to go away at that point, but we still get this weird message about the version of component model annotations, which we'll fix in a second. Let's go and take a look at all these others and fix these. For the most part, it's just doing this across the board. And again, if you have a tool like ReSharper, you can actually do that in Visual Studio, but they don't disappear a lot of times unless you physically come here and do it. Let's make sure I get site. That should be good. We want domain models, category. We want to do a using here, so I'm going to do control period for that, add that using. This one should be good now. And let's check this one. This one should be good. Oh, there's a missing one right there. Control period. And there's a missing one here. This one complains for some reason, and I'm not sure why that one complains, but we're going to end up coming back and fixing that. Let's take you out because you're not needed anymore. Now we just have these product ones. So let's make sure the product context is still there. Oh, this is complaining because our namespaces are a little off. So let's make sure we don't have any that are domain, that are just models, because Visual Studio is getting confused with them, and we updated all them. So you're good to go. Why are you complaining? Control period. Let's take out the wingtip toys. No, that should be wingtip toys. Models, which it sees, and then product context. Did I change the name of that? Yeah, I changed the name of that one. That one we didn't want to change. So let's go and double check these. This should be adding the model. Now you should notice most of the errors going away. Now all the errors are gone. So let's build the app to make sure we built it. And we get a couple of more. A lot of these are just stragglers that once you go away, I don't know why it actually pops up like that. Some of them you have to just kind of keep going and keep doing until you can successfully build it and it walks out. Those errors go away. For a lot of this, I'm just showing how we do the items, and then we are going to just kind of copy and paste existing examples, so you just don't watch me for 45 minutes hitting control period on everything. One more build, and I think we're good at this point. Yep, build succeeded. So now let's run the app and make sure it's still working. Hit play, and spoiler alert, it's not going to work. And it's not going to work because we are going to get this, which says error, too many redirects. And if you notice here, we are going to a custom error handler. So the app is buildable, but something's broken with it. So let's take a look at what's broken with it. Let's stop the app for a second, and we're going to open up the web config again. And here, when they built this app, they did what you're supposed to do. When you go in prod, turn on custom error mode equals true, so you don't see the old yellow screen of death, aka the ASP.NET error thing. But in this case, we want to see it since we're in active development. So I'm going to hit play, and spoiler, it's going to fail, which we already know, but it's going to tell us what's wrong. And this error is kind of weird at first. And let me zoom in on here so we can see what's happening. I'll probably zoom in one more time. It's saying the type or namespace category does not exist in here, and it's in Site Master. Problem is, we are using a very good technology at the time, and still pretty good, called model binding. So, and that's not caught by Visual Studio when you're building, so we have to go and fix that. So we're going to go here, back to our application. Let's stop it for a second, and then I'm going to do a global replace for this because there's quite a few instances, and I'm going to change the item type with item type this. So let's zoom in for that a little bit. So we are changing, let's move this over. Let's do Control-Shift-H and then kind of move this screen over a little bit so we can see what we're doing. So here, now if we look at this, you'll see we're changing item type equals wingtip toys.model to item type equals wingtip toys domain.model because we moved everything over. So do replace all, should find 8 instances, I think, or 8 files, 5 instances. Now if I run it, let's see what happens. I missed one. So I missed in Site Master line 93. So let's go back to Site Master, which is, I'm going to do a shortcut in Visual Studio, Alt tilde, which have to be stopped for Alt tilde. Hey, why are you not working? I probably changed my keyboard shortcuts. And let's go to line 94-ish, and we'll see right here that this did not change. And there might be a couple instances of that throughout, but I think that's the only one. And I haven't figured out why that one is broken when I do the find and replace. But this is the harder error. The type system object is defined in an assembly that is not referenced. You must reference .NET assembly or .NET standard. So this says we're referencing a .NET standard package, but I don't know how to handle that. In order to use a .NET standard project in .NET Framework, you have to add that package. So let's go and add that package. So I'm going to go back here, stop it. And like I said, we're going to be doing this a lot. So I kept this open and add .NET Standard. And then take a quick look at that. And it's this second package here. And I only need to add it to Wingtip Toys. Click Install, and it should work. And you notice I said should work because I know it's not going to work. And the reason why it's not going to work, it's going to appear with a different error that really took me a long time to try and find the answer, which is why I included it in the talk. But it says I must include a reference, but we've already added the package and already added the reference. Why is it broken? And this is a limitation of .NET Framework because it really doesn't understand how to load that. You'll see I have the package in there. So if we look at the web config, or not the web config, sorry, the packages config, we have that .NET standard right here. So the library is there, but the ASP.NET Framework doesn't know how to do it or how to load it. The answer is we can fix that. So let's go here. we want to change this compilation thing and add in a new assembly to it. So luckily I have it on the clipboard. So here we're saying when you're building the app, add a reference to .NET Standard 2.x. So we have that in there. We should be good to go now. So let's play. Fingers crossed. Everything should be working now. If there are any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it as I go. Let's close some of these other windows. Now you notice it's taking longer to load because we believe it's actually working, but Visual Studio itself has an error now, so we caught something else. And we're going to find a lot of these, which is kind of important. This one says, validation added, cart item has no key. If I look here, it says cart item has no keys to find. This is because of the way we are using Entity Framework in this package. So we're going to have to tweak that a little bit. So let's go and add in Entity Framework to here. So let's go back to our solution. And we are going to type Entity Framework. And add Entity Framework to it. It's a newer version of Entity Framework. Originally it was using 6.1. Now we're updating 6.4, which tends to fix that issue. We run it again once Entity Framework. This is the scary part. Once you agree to Entity Framework, watch here. There's so many packages that get added. You're going to get a couple of errors, but let's not worry about those right now. Another error we're going to get is, why are you failing? Oh, I changed my keyboard bindings, which is why I want the edit, go to all. I switch my keyboard bindings, and we're going to go to cart item. And this is failing because we're going to get this message. I'm just trying to speed things up a little bit. Cart item doesn't follow the standard, which is your table name and then followed by the ID. So this field should really be cart item ID, and I did Control RR. Rename it. Now if I hit play, hopefully everything is good at this point. And we are good to go. Yes. Oh, wow, that's big. So the quick validation, this means the database is working because this gets pulled from the database, but I can do projects and see. So now we started the first step. We built out a domain and we got our classic app running using ASP.NET standard in there. And this allows us, one of the reasons why I did it this way is it allows you to be able to slowly increment your production application without having to do the big bang approach to it. But now everything should be, knock on wood, a lot easier. So let's go and see what the next steps are. So I mentioned before that we have these product and contexts here inside the model. Now really they shouldn't be inside the web app. They really should be separate from it. You don't want to mix your UI with your data layers. So let's go and do that. Let's go and separate that. So here I'm going to add a new project. Same thing as before, choose .NET Standard, name this wingtip toys.data, click create, and then delete the class 1. And then we are going to move over these two files. So Control X, Control V, and we are going to change this to data, change this to data, and then that should be good for part of it. You'll notice there's still some red lines. That's because I need to add a reference to the domain project. That will kick off this, but the entity is missing. Well, that's because we haven't added any framework to it. So let's go and do that now. So I already have the Nuget Solution Explorer open. So let's go and add one. So we're going to want to add any framework core to it. But in order to save some time, I want to add in the Entity Framework Core SQL server. So let's do that because we're going to need to add that anyway because we're using a SQL Server database, and that will add Entity Core by default. So let's go and do that to Wingtip Toys and Wingtip Data. Wait a couple seconds for me to get the, do you accept these terms? And this one, for some reason, takes an extra second, 15 seconds in this particular case for some reason. Anyway, you think it's the top or second to top item that it would come by a lot faster. Actually, I think I'm going to close the packages so we stop getting this message because we're going to be doing this a lot. How many times do I have to click yes to all? Where's my packages? Let's close you out. Save them all. Let's go back to the product context. Still failing, but that's because the namespace changed. So this needs to change to using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. That goes away. Ignore that for now. And then database initializer, same thing. Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And most of those go away. And the reason why I say most of them go away is because there's a change in between Entity Framework and Entity Framework Core with respect to the data context. So you notice how seed is red underline, and this new drop create project if model changes context is different. This was a way to use any framework migrations that will recreate the database for you. Well, technically, you really shouldn't ever have to do that, but we're going to fix that. And because I don't want to watch me type, I have these already done, and I'll just kind of walk through these changes. So we're going to go here, paste that, replace the two files, yes to all. Now you notice I don't inherit from that drop database context anymore. There's now a new initialize that we do if we want to destroy and recreate the database. This says pretty much delete the database, then create the database. And then the new seed method is passing in the context. I'm calling get all categories and get all products. And this essentially prepares the database with a list of categories and a list of products. So this new database initializer is a lot cleaner. Now, the context is a little bit different. We have this on model creating now, which I believe we had before, but the syntax was slightly different. And you could ignore this if false. I have it set to false because I don't want it to have to recreate the database every time we run. Typically, you would do a check to see if the database is there and then recreate it. But I left it in here just for everyone to see. Now let's run it and make sure everything works. And things don't build. Let me make sure that the data project builds. So I'm going to click build, watch here, that built. Make sure the domain project built, that built. So now we're getting a bunch of other error messages. Product or namespace, product context not found. And we know why that's not found, because I deleted it from the model. So I have to go back and add a reference to it here. So add reference to data, click OK. Now if I build everything, we should be good to go. And we are not good to go. Why are we not good to go? Not good to go because the location changed for these. So these really should be using wingtip_toys.data. So let's go and change those. This is going to be broken for a little bit, so we're going to have to spend some time cleaning them up. So before we clean those up, let's go and add in a new project to go and kind of get that data, because we want to pull out all that logic and get the data going in an easier way. Where are you? Let's see if we can just fix these and verify it's running. And that's too many to fix right now, so we are not going to fix them. Let's go and add in our next project. Ignore the broken ones. They're going to be broken for a bit because we are going to add a new project, a logic project. Some people will call this service. Some people will call it manager. I like to call it logic because to me that's what it's doing. So wingtip toys, logic. We're going to go through and delete the class. So this is actually going to do the work of getting the data from database and all that stuff. So let's start off with a new class called product manager. And this should be product manager. Make this class public. And then we are going to take everything from this add project or add product in logic and pretty much copy it out. So it's just this text here. Control X and move you over to, where'd you go? Product manager. Add you here. Logic is failing because we don't have the domain project or the database project in there. So let's go and add reference. Choose data domain. Click OK. Now I just need to add in the models part, add in the data part. And now this is good to go. Now we are going to want to add a cart manager to this too. So let's go and do that. So add new class, cart manager. And again, you can call these things anything you want. Some people call them services, some call them managers. I like to call them managers. It's weird because at the company I work for, Quicken Loans, we don't use the term manager, we use the term leader. So for this one, we are going to want to copy over the cart manager because there's actually a lot of work with the cart manager. So let's go and do this. So let's copy over you and copy over you. You'll see essentially we took the cart manager which was in shopping cart actions, and went and copy and pasted all of that into here. Now the shopping cart actions itself has a lot of different things all throughout. So we kind of just moved over some of that, and we're going to replace that anyway. So let's go back up here and add the reference to our new logic. And then we are going to have to add SQL Server to this now, or any framework core SQL to it. Oh, it's already in there. So we add it. So we should be good to, I might have to add it to the logic app. So let's just do that to make sure. Now, there's going to be a lot of errors once we do this, as we see. And to save some time, we are going to copy and paste. But essentially, you know, we move the data from one project to another. So I'm not going to go and click on all those. So let's go and copy all those out to our toys. See, there's about 15 files change, or 13. And typically you would just go and Alt Enter, replace, and then you should be good. Now it's only complaining about one particular thing, and that's this shopping cart updates. Like I mentioned here, our shopping cart updates was a bit of a mess. So we are going to have to re-add that, as well as a method in our products to do get categories. So let's go to Product Manager and add get categories. That was hard-coded in the shopping cart for some reason. And this is complaining because it doesn't know about a list. And then we need to add in a new model. So let's open up the models and click add new class. This is going to be called shopping cart updates. Actually a pretty terrible class in the code. It's a structure, and I really didn't dig into much of why it's there, but just again to kind of show how we break up the project as we go along, and little pitfalls that you're going to run into. So now if we look at this, should have two issues. This should be data, and this should be data. Now, if we got everything working, we should be able to run it. Fingers crossed. Let's see if the run actually happens. Spoiler alert, it doesn't run. We're going to get a message saying no database provider has been configured for this DB context, blah, blah, blah. Essentially what that means is, and this is a breaking change from any framework to any framework core, the way the database is initialized and the way any framework connects to it is different. So it's different because it expects it to be configured when you are creating an instance of the context. So we need to add in this. It says on configuring, meaning when I'm started, go and load up the connection string from here and pass it off. And this says we're using SQL Server because you have the option to do a lot of others, which means, guess what? We need to add more packages. You're probably wondering yourself, why do I have to add all these packages in? And there's a simple reason for it. With .NET Core, they made the decision, which I agree with, that everything is too large. What they used to do is ship everything, and you had everything, which meant your security risk was greatly improved or greatly expanded, because if you had 17 packages on your computer, you have the potential for those 17, even though you might only be using one. So now everything is more of a opt-in. So let's go and add this to those projects. Click install. I lost my doc again. Click OK. Now we're adding the configuration manager to it. And I already added everything else, so we should be good to go. Ignore these for a little bit. It still runs to some extent. And we're going to get build failures. At this point, why did I get a build failure? We get a build failure because we are getting this message because, why did we get it? Oh, because the configuration, why is the configuration, oh, I forgot to do the using statement for it, sorry. Now it should build and go. But guess what? This one's going to fail too. And this one fails for another reason altogether. You're going to get this, could not load assembly. So for a while, the application was running, but we were getting an issue right here that says the annotation framework is different because some of the assemblies are using an older version than others. We have to kind of get them all in sync. So we need to go and open up the web config. And we are going to add a new dependent assembly here and tell it to use the newer version, even if you have an older dependency. So this says, for anyone that wants system.componentModel.annotations with this public key, anywhere between version 0 and version 4.7, use version 4.7. Now, if you run this, we might get a failure. And this failure I haven't been able to replicate often, but it has happened the last 3 times. And the failure indicates that it was not able to reinstall the package. And as you see, we still get the same error message. If this happens, you have to go and manually reinstall the package. So open up the Project Package Manager console. You can do that from View, Other Windows, Package Manager console, and then type in the following command. And I don't know if I can, oh, I can increase it. So let's increase it a little bit. To update Package Manager, reinstall System Component Model annotations. And that takes a second or two. And then it downloads that package. Once it's done, we should be able to run it and everything should work. Man, this one takes a while. There it goes. Click yes. And that's because I had the web config open. Now if I run it, fingers crossed, everything should be working. And we're physically pulling the data from the .NET framework not from .NET Framework anymore, but from the .NET Core package. And it should be evident by here. So now we're pulling it from the database from a separate project. So now we migrated the domain, we created a separate logic app, and we migrated over the code, or we migrated over the data. Now the fun part comes. How do we migrate over the UI part? This in itself can be a full hour, 2, 3, 4 hour session. So I'm going to cover some of the highlights for it. We're not going to go through and update all, I think it's like 55 pages here for it, but we're going to do a couple. So in true fashion, let's go and create a new project, add new project, and then we are going to choose ASP.NET Core Web Application, hit Next, name it Wingtip Toys.WebUI, hit Create. Now you get prompted with a new dialog box. This new dialog box varies based on what project templates you have. I think this is the out of the box, but you have the ability to download and install other products. So you can create an empty project, which if you want to do everything from scratch, you can do an API, web application, or web application using MVC, Angular app, React, or React and Redux. We're going to choose a web application which uses the Razor pages. For now, we're going to pick no authentication because we actually have a lot of that wiring in our previous app. Always want to choose configure for HTTPS by default. We're not going to enable Docker support because that's a whole nother session altogether. And I'm not going to do the Razor runtime because I want you to see what's happening. So let's hit create. Now you'll notice a dialog box. We're going to ignore this, but essentially you get documentation and the plug for Azure. So let's close that. We look at our app, it looks a little bit different now. So if we zoom in here, we'll see we have connected services, dependencies, properties, WW root, pages, app settings, program files, and startup, all new things. So essentially the static files are everything in WW root. Anything that is dynamic, so in the classic ASP sense or ASP.NET, all your active server pages go in pages. The app settings.json replaces the web config. The program essentially starts up, so if you built any console apps, it's the same thing that says, when this application starts, I'm going to call submain, tell me what to do, and then startup is what you really do to configure your application. So let's go and take a look at the first thing. So like we did with all the others, we're going to add a reference to these projects. So add project reference, Wingtip Toys, Wingtip Data, Wingtip Domain. Oops, didn't want to add the Wingtip Toys. Don't do that, Joe. Click OK. And if you notice at the bottom, it restored all the packages, so we are good. First thing we want to do is add the database connection strings. So we're going to go to app settings. For ease of use, I'm just going to put this in the app settings, not app settings development. So here you'll notice it uses essentially the JSON object format where there's a hierarchy. So connection strings is its own set of objects with the two names. Now, one thing that's different from this connection to the other is the content path. So in this app, or in the framework app, you'll notice that there is a attached DB with data directory. So ASP.NET Framework would replace this with whatever the working directory is /app_data. You don't do that anymore in .NET Core. So because this is a working sample, we're going to walk you through how you fix that. typically you would have this in a separate database and not rely in your app data. So in order to do that, we're going to use some of the functions of ASP.NET Core. So let's first copy out the app data file, bring it here, and that should have the 6 files in there, which it does. Then we're going to go to our startup and look at our startup and see it says, okay, when the app is starting up, I'm going to give you the configuration. That says it kind of loads that app settings.json and a couple other files and gives it to us. But we want it to provide a little bit more to us. So we're telling it here, provide me the host environment, meaning I want to know where you're hosted so I can get the content path. That essentially gets me the fully qualified path to the folder that's running. So in this case, it'd be something like C project / webtoys.webui / whatever. Now we need to tell it to replace that. So we're going to go and configure services and says, these are all the services I want to use when you start up. So we're going to go and load the configuration, look for the word content root path with parentheses around it, and then replace it with the physical path. So it's going to take that parentheses content root path and replace it with C:\, whatever I have this installed. Next thing we're going to do is we need to initialize Entity Framework here. So we're going to initialize Entity Framework with this setting, which says any framework or services, I want you to add a DB context called data.productContext and use SQL Server for that. So we essentially taken what we had in the product context and moved it into the app startup. So in your application startup, you can tell it what you want to do. I know we're running close on time. This will take probably another 5 or 6 more minutes if you want to stay through lunch. If not, I have no problem with you dropping if you need me. And I apologize for going over, but I forgot to change the presentation settings to make it easier. So if we build the project now, we should be good to go. And let me build it. And the build was succeeded. I'm going to skip migrating the entity stuff. Or actually, no, let's migrate the entity stuff. So in order to do that, we are going to want to create a model folder here. Do new folder, models. Now for this, we're not going to copy the existing one because the existing one is it uses an older version of it. So let's go and create a new one, add new class, identity, model, and I already have the text on the clipboard, but essentially you go to this URL and it gives you all the details. Since we're not customizing any of ours, or that initial product did not customize it, it stays like this. So it's missing some packages, so let me add those packages, manage Nuget packages, and I need to do Microsoft.extensions.identity core and do that in the browse part. Hit install. Accept. Once that is done, we want to add Microsoft ASP core identity, and that's that one. We're going to want to add this one too, so I'm just going to add that one. And then the last is the cookie support. So that should be ASP.NET Core authentication and cookie. Now you might use any one of these. This is just for this sample app. That one requires everything. So click OK, accept. And there's 2 more steps to get it to work. And then we should be good. Let's come back to the model. This is good. Let's go back to our startup and tell it that we want to add a DB context for our new application DB context. This is going to store our user IDs and roles and stuff. And then add this identity model to it. And we're going to use the UI model as application user and assign it to this identity role. Then we should be good to go. If we run this app, we're going to get one more failure, and that is because of the way that we created the constructor for the UI app. Doesn't work the same in core. Oh, it works. I must have fixed it. So, oh, I started up the wrong app. That's why. Let's go and stop this. Set you as the startup. Hit play. You notice this one starts significantly faster as well as fails significantly faster too, because ASP.NET Core is noticeably faster. You're going to get an error saying add DB context was called the configuration, but the context type product context only declares a parameterless constructor, which is true. We had to make some changes to allow it to work with the framework site, but now we have to make some changes for it to work with the core version. So in order for us to do this, we need to add in a constructor to it to tell it to accept the DB context. And then we're going to need to do the same thing in the application context. And then control period, add you. And then we should be good. When I run this, you notice there are lots of build errors. We essentially broke the UI project, or the original UI product. We can go back and fix it, but that's a little bit ahead of time. Now if I hit play, we're going to get, oh, we got one more build error. What else did I missed a step? Wingtip toys. Oh, these change because these want that new interface here. So we are going to have to fix those by adding the following command now. So this tells us we are going to load in, oh, I copied the wrong one, my bad. Let's go to product manager, create a new class here. And we're going to get a couple of build errors because of this. So let's get rid of the using. And this is because now the framework provides us with those. And we'll add that in a second. Let's get rid of you. Get rid of you. Do the same thing for the cart manager. There's going to be a couple more failures here with the cart manager. And let's get rid of some of those. And that's this one here. We're just going to get rid of the dispose altogether because we want .NET Core to manage that. Let's get rid of this using here. Get rid of this using here. And then one more using here. And I think that's it. So now the app works, but we need to tell any framework, or we need to tell ASP.NET Core how to get those in. And you do that by creating interfaces and injecting those interfaces. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to have you watch me do that. So I am going to copy all that out. As I say, for the sake of time, as we are over time, but good thing we're going into lunch. Take the cart manager, place U, and that's in logic. And then last is the domain. So back to Visual Studio, yes to all. You'll see the cart manager is the same, but inherits from now iCart manager. Same thing with product, inherits from iCart manager. And there's actually a Visual Studio shortcut. If you do Control period, you can do extract interface, which is right here, and it does a lot of that for you. And then we built out those interfaces for it. Now we have to tell startup how to use those. So that is relatively easy. We're going to go back to startup, and right around here, we're going to say, hey, when you start up and you are looking for something called an iCart manager, we create an instance of this class, logic.cartManager, and return that. When you're looking for a product manager, create an instance of logic cart manager. So how do we go about using that? It's actually pretty easy. Let's go to pages and look at our index just to try it out. So index is kind of our index.aspx. So here there's a sample where we're injecting a logger. We're going to want to inject the product. So I have this code already on the clipboard. So here we're saying create a private instance of, oops, I pasted, I don't really want to copy and paste over this. I have a logger here. I have a domain product manager. So this says, hey, there's a class that wants an iProduct manager. So ASP.NET Core is going to create an instance of logic.productManager and call it and get that here. So let's see if it works. I'm going to hit play here, debug it, and if this works, we are good to go. And I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint and let everyone go. So we got categories, and if we look, we got 5 categories now. So it worked, and we got further. So if we look there, category count equals, oh, we can't see it, but if we watch the next step, we'll see that categories equals 5. So we're good to go. We injected it. There's a lot more that can happen, but that gets you over the initial hump of starting with it. Hope you learned a bit or two today. If you visit this site, you can find a copy of this presentation, all 3 sides, but more importantly, the GitHub repo that shows this, the sample documentation, and the completed solution. Hope you learned something. Hope you have a great day, and please leave feedback. It's the only way we get better. And I'll paste the URL to the presentation in the slide deck, but also since I'm bringing it up on screen, it should save it as part of the recording. So this is where you can go to get a copy of the slide deck and the repo. That being said, have a great day.